Welcome to the Sacred Resonance Podcast. I'm Reverend Larry J. Morse III. I'm glad you're here. Before we begin, take a breath with me. In through your nose and out through your mouth. Let your body settle wherever it is. Now, there are places my body remembers before my mind catches up, and San Diego is one of them. I don't always have the language for the pull. I just know that this pull starts quietly, a tug in my chest, a softening in my shoulders, a sense that my breath is asking for more room. And when that happens, I know it's time for me to get to San Diego. Now, people who know me now, they sometimes ask, why this city? Why this water? Why this stretch of the coastline, or the coastline rather? And this is the truth. I didn't really understand it at first either. I only knew that something in me responds when I'm in San Diego, not with urgency, but with care, with honesty. San Diego is a place I return to, not to escape life, but to remember myself in the midst of life. At the end of 2025, I felt that pull again. I kept saying, I need to get to the beach. Now, I live in Colorado, and folks were telling me to go to the lake. I went to the lake. The lake didn't do it for me. I did. I tried. But I said, let me get to the beach. And yes, this pull to the beach was true. Water has always been one of the ways that the divine, that the sacred meets me. Steady, patient, unwilling to rush. But the deeper truth was something else. It was more than rest. It was more than wanting to be by the water. I needed San Diego in particular. San Diego holds the memory of a version of me who learned how to say yes to my own becoming. And so today, I want to take you back to the first time I came to San Diego, the year I turned 30, the year a door opened that changed everything for me. Now, that year was 2012. I had just turned 30 in January. Shout out to the Capricorns. And I could feel a little uneasiness in me. It wasn't a crisis, but a little bit of pressure. It was a soul level knowing that said, you are not meant to stay in Indianapolis anymore. What's important to name is this: there wasn't anything dramatically wrong with my life in Indianapolis. And I think that's the part that people sometimes misunderstand. It wasn't collapse, it wasn't chaos, it wasn't even unhappiness necessarily. It was more like my breath had gotten shallow. It felt like wearing a t shirt that had become too small. Nothing wrong with the shirt itself. It had carried me well. It had history, it had meaning, but it could no longer fit the body I was living in. I remember moving through my days feeling compressed, not unsafe, just constricted. My life worked somewhat on paper. It wasn't a bad life on paper, and it made sense to other people. But something in me was quietly undoing. Not dissatisfaction exactly, more like internal discontentment, right? My inner part, my inner being. It was just discontentment. I didn't have language for it at the time. A lack of satisfaction that wasn't about wanting more, but about needing truer, needing to be authentic and living into authenticity. And the strange thing was, my mind kept trying to override it, to explain it away, to tell my body to be grateful for what you have, and to keep going. But my body knew what my mind had not caught up to yet, that staying in Indianapolis would require me to keep shrinking. And I couldn't do that anymore. Not at 30. Something about the age of 30 in that time just made me want to live fuller and to live freer. What makes this even more important to name is I had never been to San Diego. Never. I never visited. I never even set foot in California at all. I didn't have memories there or some connection there. I didn't even have familiarity. It was a brand new place. I didn't have proof that things would work. Now, I did have an uncle who lived in California for a while, but I was never able to visit him, so it wasn't a return to California. It was a departure. It was a departure into the unknown. And somehow that was important. Because in that season, I found myself resonating deeply with stories in scripture, the ones where people were called to lands they had never seen or never been. Stories where the call comes before the map, the invitation comes before knowing what's going to happen. Those stories where obedience doesn't come with the details, you know? Well, the only thing you know is that you cannot stay where you are. I didn't experience these stories or those stories as heroic. I experienced them as terrifying and holy. Now, around that time, I was writing music, and I wrote a song. I don't remember all of the words, and I can't find it before I recorded this, but the heart of it stays with me. It says something like, God is calling you to the unknown, to a new place, to a new land, to a new space. Now, I didn't know where San Diego would lead me. I didn't even know what it would ask of me. I didn't know how much San Diego would change me, but I knew this. What I was being called toward was unknown. And what I was being asked to leave was no longer enough. I'll also say that all of my family and community was in Indianapolis. I didn't have family who lived outside of Indy. Now, at the time before I moved, I was doing this deep inner work, right? I was in therapy. Shout out to therapy. It works for folks. I was praying, like really praying. I was fasting. I was sitting with Andrew Murray's In the School of Prayer with Christ. It was 40 days of prayer, of reading, of silence. And I was letting all of those things work me slowly. I was also healing from a relationship that never quite became what it promised or what I thought it was going to become. There was a sense of care there for sure, but not clarity. Discernment was there, but not mutuality. And part of me already knew that we were not really aligned. I had dreams about it. But sometimes when you're in the thing, right? But at the same time, as this relationship thing was happening, I also stepped away from church. I didn't step away from God, never from the divine, but from the institution, from spaces that had wounded me with silence, with assumptions, and with half truths. Honestly, I just didn't feel supported in the institution. I didn't feel held. And I am someone who I don't beg for belonging or community, right? I don't like to perform to belong somewhere. And so I stepped away. But here's one of the things that humbles me when I think about that time, that even outside of the church, that the divine, the sacred stayed close. Psalms 139 became real in that particular season. You know the psalm. It says, "Where can I flee from your presence?" Now, sometimes that particular phrase felt comforting. And sometimes it felt like, listen, God, back up a little bit. Give me a little bit of space just to breathe. But either way, I knew that I wasn't alone. Mama was praying, family and friends were praying and calling me and reading scriptures and devotionals over the phone, preaching to me. Sometimes somebody always got a word. But yeah, I stepped away again from the institution. But there was still this spiritual scaffolding around me, even when institutional support had fallen away. And then alignment. While I was praying and fasting and in therapy, while I was healing and listening, the job I had at the time announced that they were expanding business out west. They were already allowing one person to work remotely, and now they were open to another person working remotely. You know what I did? I put my name and I said, I'll go west. And so they offered me moving assistance, tuition reimbursement. I was re-enrolling in school. And almost overnight, a student housing building opened up. It was new, furnished, clean, simple. It was small, but everything else was good. It's like everything that had been blocked for those years had opened up all at once. It felt like the divine was saying, listen, here's the door. This is your door. Go ahead and walk through it. Now, people thought that I was running away. And, I can understand why. I was healing from heartbreak. I was frustrated with the institutional church. I was trying to find my voice again, my identity in that particular season of life. But the truth was actually much simpler and braver than me running away. I wasn't running away. I was running toward something. I was running toward my future, toward my own becoming, toward a life I could sense, even if I didn't have the words for it yet, right? Or even if I couldn't see it all, I could sense it in my body and in my spirit that something more was waiting for me. I will say that the people around me didn't try to stop me. They were supportive. They were quietly supportive, but supportive nonetheless, which in its own way, it did feel like a blessing, right? That although they didn't understand, they did not try to sabotage or keep me there. Now, this is how I remember leaving Indianapolis. It was early morning. I drove over to my grandmother's house on Kenwood. My uncle met me there. Mama had been praying. I didn't know. I know Mama was praying, but Mama had been praying that someone would drive with me. Now, listen, when I got the okay to go, I was about to get in my car and drive from Indianapolis to San Diego solo. If I have a yes, sometimes I need to listen to a little bit more of the instructions, right? But if I have the yes and a sense of peace within my being, I'm gonna roll out. So that's what I was gonna do. Mama was praying that somebody would go with me, and I don't know if she talked to my uncle, one of my uncles, or not, but he decided to go. And when he decided to go, Mama took that as her answered prayer, right? It was like I think the last piece of confirmation that she needed in her own kind of being that this was a good and right move. So in front of my grandma's house, we hugged, we loaded up that car. And I remember the car that I had at the time. It wasn't just any car. I was driving a red, almost maroon Jeep Commander. And that car felt exactly right for that season. It was strong, it was grounded, a little rugged, but it was built for distance. It was built for traveling for journeying. Now my uncle, who was supposed to, ride with me, that brother got in the passenger seat. I got behind the wheel. I looked at my grandmama's house one last time, and then we drove west. I should say I drove west because that brother didn't really drive. He was a passenger, but he was present. I'll give him that. And I remember a sense of excitement, but there was also grief. And I think that leaving home or leaving a place usually carries grief. Again, there was also excitement, this deep sense of, let me move out of the way because God is doing something. What God is doing, I don't know everything, but the divine is moving. The sacred is with me. I didn't know what would meet me on the other side of my yes. I did not know what it would cost. I didn't know how much I would change. I only knew that I could no longer stay where I was. And years later, when my body tugs, when my breath shortens, when my spirit needs remembering, I still find my way back to San Diego. San Diego, I think, holds one of my first memories of real consent. It's the place that I said yes with my whole body, the place where becoming began. I want to offer you a question to carry, not to answer quickly, but to live with. Where in your life is a door opening before you have all the information? And what would it feel like to listen, not just with your mind, but with your spirit and your body? Sometimes the call or the invitation does not come as clarity. Sometimes it comes as a tug, as an invitation. And honoring that tug, listen, it can change everything. If this story resonates with you, you're welcome to stay connected and to follow along or to visit sacredresonance.co. Now, next time, I will tell you what happened after I arrived, when the floor fell out. And the life that I prayed for, I could no longer hold, or it could no longer hold me. But until then, stay attentive to what your spirit and your body knows. Stay gentle with yourself and stay gentle with your yes. This is Sacred Resonance, and thank you for joining.